Hi there, welcome to Word on Wednesday. It's our opportunity in the middle of the week to pause and reflect on the things that we looked at Gather Worship on Sunday. Now this Sunday was our all-age service and we took a break from looking at the fruitfulness on the front line material that we've been engaging with as we've been doing our themed monthly themes, reaching up and reaching in and reaching out. And we caught up with the material that the children have been doing in Sunday Club. We had a recap from Lisa reminding us of some of the characters they've looked at, and then that led into us looking at the character for this week, and it was the character of David. David, one of the most famous kings of Israel, and we engaged in one of the most famous aspects of his life, or stories of his life, and that was his encounter with Goliath. So we set the scene a bit as we told the story, and we had a big kind of Goliath head, and we managed to string it up across the church 10 feet high, almost 3 meters high, just to get a sense of how intimidating this guy must have been. And so we continued on with the story about how David begins to respond to the taunts of the Philistine champion, and he ends up offering to fight him. And we were hanging on to things as we went through and told the story, things where David was bringing God into the equation, God into the situation. Well, if you know the story, you'll know what happens next when David fought Goliath. We got into that by not with slingshots and stones in an enclosed space that would not look good on a risk assessment. So we had elastic bands and paper pellets, and we tried to bring the giant down. And there were some great hits marked by great cheers from the Israelite side of the congregation. It was great fun, but it kind of rooted us in the story just a little bit, helped us trying to get a feel for things. Goliath, this champion, this figure that couldn't be defeated, this giant that was insurmountable. And we were thinking about how, although kind of God gives David the victory, David still has to do his bit. He has to take his slingshot and take his 5 smooth stones from the stream and go and face Goliath. Now, ultimately, God gave him the victory, but David still has to do his bit. And kind of thinking about that a little bit, we heard a story from Terry and Sue about the previous church they were in, and about how they believed God wanted them to step out in faith. And that was to purchase a shop next door and kind of build and connect onto it. They didn't have the money for any of this, but they believed it was what God wanted them to do. And so they committed to the project, even though they didn't have the money. And as the project went on, they still didn't have the money. Then all of a sudden, through a legacy that was given, they had a huge amount of money that came in, and they were able to buy the property, build what they needed to build, and also give away money, a portion of the money, to other churches around to support ministry and mission in other fellowships around them. It was a great story of them doing their bit. They stepped out in faith, and then God did his bit. And then we kind of reflected on the things that we've been hanging on to as we went through, the things we noted about God being brought into the situation as we went through the story. And we were thinking about, it's David who brings God in to the situation. Saul and the army, they're stuck. But it's David who looks through this real life situation through a theological lens. He talks about how Goliath is defying the armies of the living God. That's the first time God gets a mention in this whole situation. And it's through David, not the king, not the army. It's through David. So where was God in the king's thinking? Where was God in the army's thinking? David begins to bring God into the situation. And so it goes on. We're looking at the things that David brought into the situation. He talks about being delivered from the bear and the lion. He talks about it's God that's going to deliver Goliath into his hands. He talks about how all this is going to happen so that everyone around will know that there is a God in Israel. So where did that leave us? It kind of posed us with some questions, really. Where is God in our thinking? When we face those issues that seem insurmountable, things that look too big to be overcome, where does God figure in our thinking? See, if we restrict our thinking to our wherewithal and our ability and our capabilities and all those kind of things, then we'll have a very small kind of worldview. Everything will shrink. Possibilities shrink. But if we look at those things through a theological lens, then suddenly things become to grow. The possibilities grow bigger. They expand. So where are the things that we are facing, the Goliaths that we are facing? Maybe it's individuals or as a fellowship. Where are the Goliaths we are facing as a fellowship? When we're staring at those things that we kind of believe we ought to do, but they look impossible. How might we take the encouragement from the story of David? What might change for us if we keep God front and centre in our thinking, in our praying, in our approaching real life issues? So I don't know where that left you on Sunday, or where that's kind of landed now. But just remember the words of David. He said, it's the Lord who delivers. It's the Lord who saves. The battle belongs to the Lord. It's his. We do our bit and God will do his. So I hope that encourages you, both in your personal life and if you are part of the fellowship, to begin to think about how we look at the future. How might we be encouraged to do our bit and anticipate that God will do his? Well, I hope you enjoy the rest of your day, and may God bless you richly. Amen.